NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. And if you're waking up to another hot, sweaty day, you're not alone. Over the past 7 days, there have been 359 daily high temperature records set across this country. And across the Atlantic, Europe is burning up as well. More than 1,700 people died in Portugal and Spain alone in this current heat wave More than 1,700 people died in Portugal and Spain alone in this current heat wave that they're experiencing. This country. And across the Atlantic, Europe is burning up as well. More than 1,700 people died in Portugal and Spain alone in this current heat wave that they're experiencing. In his 2006 documentary film, An Inconvenient Truth, former Vice President Al Gore warned that we were going to experience rising temperatures, melting glaciers, drying lakes, more wildfires, and stronger storms over the next 20 or 30 years. Well, guess what? In the 16 years since that film debuted, we've seen rising temperatures, melting glaciers, drying lakes, more wildfires in more states in this country, and yes, stronger storms. We've experienced a lot of that in the last.
Now, wait a minute. We're talking about the man that run for president that the state of Tennessee declared as him being a nut. We're talking about the old timers, the baby boomers that declared Al Gore towards him being a tree hugger or an environmental lover. We're talking about Al Gore being correct. What are you talking about, Meet the Press? Let's listen on to this. This has been the most disgraceful thing that I believe the American people has ever had to face off on, especially since a man was trying to help humanity and they deemed him as him being just the other way around. That tells you the mindset of not just the Tennesseans pertaining to the elderly, pertaining to the baby boomers, but this tells you the mindset of America in how that they took somebody such as Al Gore that was trying to help them and slapped him upside the face 20 plus years ago by saying, we think that you're a nut and keep your ideologies to yourself. Well, 20 years plus has passed, and now we're seeing the very developments that people like Al Gore and myself has said that was going to occur that are now occurring.
He's alone. So despite all of the evidence staring us in the face like a hot sun, the United States remains a reluctant soldier in the fight against global warming. Just this month, Democrat Joe...
Just like they remain a reliant soldier in the gun violence, pertaining to all the gun violence. We have a bunch of idiots in the White House, in Congress right now, that is basically marching all of us off into a ballistic doom. Kind of like marching off into the mouth of the volcano. And until we're smart enough to identify these people that have been idiots that have done this to us and get them out of office and put some people in there that knows what the hell's going on, we're going to continue to suffer tremendously and horrendously.
Democrat Joe Manchin punted again on what was left of President Biden's climate bill, which is already opposed by all 50 Senate Republicans.
All 50.
In his documentary, way back in 2006, Mr. Gore said this.
Are we, as Americans, capable of doing great things even though they are difficult? Are we capable of rising above ourselves and above history? Well, the record indicates that we do have that capacity.
And joining me now is Al Gore. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, this week felt like your PowerPoint from Inconvenient Truth come to life. Some of the headlines: the Colorado River having to do water rations, the monarch butterfly declared an endangered species. We had the ice melt in Greenland, record high temperatures in the UK, wildfires in France and Greece. The Rio Grande is running dry in New Mexico. It's here. How much do you look back at what you warned and suddenly you see it come to life?
Well, I wish the scientists had been wrong in their predictions going back decades now, Chuck. All I have done is really convey the scientific facts as the scientists have patiently explained them to me. It's due to get much, much worse and quickly. But we have the ability to stop temperatures from going up. If we got to true net zero, the temperatures on Earth would stop going up with a lag time of as little as 3 to 5 years, almost as if we flipped a switch. And if we stayed at true net zero, then half of the human-caused CO2 emissions would fall out of the atmosphere in as little as 25 to 30 years. And we have the solutions available.
Right.
We need to deploy them quickly.
Let's talk about the issue, though, that I think is probably the biggest challenge, and that is political will. And it's not just in this country. China and India are emerging powers that are relying on fossil fuels. Europe is backsliding with the decision on methane. How, if the United States can't be a global leader here, who will?
Well, the United States must step up and provide leadership. And of course, President Biden's been trying to do that. And he has a 50-50 Senate, really a 49-51 Senate on everything related to the climate, and a razor-thin majority in the House. You know, Abraham Lincoln once said, with public sentiment, everything is possible. Without it, nothing can succeed. The rest of us need to step up. The one thing that Senator Manchin said that I really agree with is that if we want more pro-climate policies, we need to elect more pro-climate senators and representatives in both parties. And we've got an election coming up, and this is time for all of us to step up. You know, the climate deniers are really in some ways similar to all of those almost 400 law enforcement officers in Uvalde, Texas, who were waiting outside an unlocked door while the children were being massacred. They heard the screams, they heard the gunshots, and nobody stepped forward. And God bless those families who've suffered so much. And law enforcement officials tell us that's not typical of what law enforcement usually does. And confronted with this global emergency, what we're doing with our inaction and failing to walk through the door and stop the killing is not typical of what we are capable of as human beings. We do have the solutions, and I think these extreme events that are getting steadily worse and more severe are really beginning to change minds. We have to have unity as a nation to come together and stop making this a political football. It shouldn't be a partisan issue.
You know, it's interesting. Public sentiment on climate is certainly in some ways growing more urgent. And you've made notice that rank and file Republicans are growing more concerned about the climate. But you know, public opinion is on one side on abortion, is on one side on guns, is on one side on climate, and yet you see that it hasn't mattered to some of the decisions that are made in our politics. How do you break through this?
Because the American people are under some sort of a demonic hypnosis. They have been bamboozled. It's almost like that they have been bewitched. And a great deal of those climate deniers, even to this day, I could drive less than a quarter of a mile in either direction other than driving south, because if I drive south, I can't drive that way. Down there's at the bottom. Down there is the river. But I could drive in either direction for a very short, limited amount of time, and I could find climate deniers to this day, but yet and all their crops is burning up and they're suffering. So I don't know what it's going to take for the American people to stand back up and become a leadership country again, because obviously the baby boomers, the Woodstock era, the free love and the free sex and the culture that was sworn that all these things was okay in the sight of God, and God wasn't going to punish us. It's very obvious that they have made a mistake. And now the sad thing about it is, it's not just them that's going to suffer, because the majority of them are just at the point of one foot in a grave and another one on a banana peeling to begin with. It's it's us. It's the millennials, it's the children that are going to suffer immensely, because look what they're going to inherit after we have all died and went on. It has got to be the most horrific travesty that has ever become of the American dream in the past 30 plus years towards what went on that should not have went on in the White House in the latter part of Reagan's era and the beginning part of Walter Bush H's presidency of read my lips and not my hips administration. It has got to be the most horrifying 30 plus years that now we're seeing it unfold on a daily basis on just exactly what happened.
Well, you're exactly right, and public sentiment is changing, but our democracy is broken, and in order to solve the climate crisis, we're going to have to pay attention to the democracy crisis. The same reason that it's seemingly impossible for the Congress to pass legislation banning these weapons of war, these assault rifles that are being used to murder children in classrooms and create hundreds of mass casualty events already this year, and that's getting worse. The same reason we can't pass legislation to, for example, reinstate the ban on assault weapons is the same reason that we can't pass climate legislation. We have a minority government. We have the filibuster still, which ought to be eliminated. We have big money playing much too large a role in our politics, lobbyists for the fossil fuel industry, and they're still running all of these advertisements trying to convince people that it's not that bad or they've got this, don't worry about it. We have got to rise to this challenge, Chuck. You know, what you see behind me is a picture from the space station showing how thin the atmosphere is. If you could drive to the top of that blue line, drive straight up in the air at interstate highway speeds, you'd get to the top of that line in about 5 minutes, and below you would be all of the greenhouse gas pollution. We're using that as an open sewer, dumping 162 million tons into it every day, and the accumulated amount now traps as much heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding on the Earth every day. And we have the solutions. Renewable energy from wind and solar is now cheaper in almost the entire world than electricity from fossil fuels. Those utilities here in the U.S. that have doubled down on gas are seeing their rates go up, while those who are picking solar and wind, their rates are going down.
Look, solar appears to have kept Texas from having brownouts because they expanded their solar on the grid. But let me ask you this. What should President Biden do now? Besides advocating for more pro-climate senators, that's a ballot box solution. Is there anything he can do in an executive aspect of things around Congress right now?
Well, I welcome his announcement this week to jumpstart the offshore wind industry in the U.S., and he's taken quite a number of other important actions, and he's reversed some of the terrible policies of his predecessor. But he needs congressional action in order to take the bold steps that are really needed. There are many other things that he can do. He can stop approving any more fossil fuel development on federal lands and permits for yet more fossil fuel development. The International Energy Agency says that we should not have any new oil and gas fields developed if we want to see the survival of human civilization as in anything resembling its current form.
And yet, inflation and the price of gas. You were an elected official. You know the burden of that hangs on these politicians. You know, it short term, long term. You see the pressure President Biden's under.
But yet now, because of the Supreme Court legislation that passed Roe versus Wade, now they're deeming that as a health emergency and passing new legislation laws, but our president can't pass new legislation laws pertaining to the environment. You know, it's one thing if a girl has been raped or she has some sort of problems in regards towards delivering of that baby, that the baby has to be aborted. That was the whole primary purpose for abortion to ever come into existence to begin with, was over emergency situations. If people cannot see this environmental problem as an emergency problem, we are heading down a slope of no return. And once we do get over that threshold, there won't be no room for reform. There won't be no room for restoration. There won't be no room for redoing this and getting it right the next time. Because by that time, there will be so much irreversible damage to the ozone. Like he just got through saying, I thought the ozone was 9 miles. He's saying that it's 5 miles. If I'm not mistaken, the ozone is actually breaking down to the point that it's allowing now for the radiation coming off of the sun to go directly onto the earth. And you talk about cancer and you talk about danger as far as seeing the ecosystem go wild and crazy. You know, frogs having 2 heads and cows having 3 heads, and I mean, freakish things happens whenever you take nature out of order. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, it's an abnormal lifestyle according to the Bible pertaining to all the gays and lesbians. A matter of fact, it got brought up just last night in regards to all this to somebody. I don't forgot now who it was. I was out in the parking lot talking to him. He was a military guy, married a woman from Germany. I could tell by looking at his car, he had a Germany license plate on the front of his car, so I started talking to him. And it's almost as if our politicians knows that they have failed us in this regard. And rather than treating this as an emergency situation, like they was treating the abortion law clinic rules that just got changed a few months ago, rather than addressing these issues head on pertaining to the mistakes that the politicians has made for us in the past 30 plus years, it's almost like that they're deliberately shaking their fist in the eyes of the Lord, wanting God to come back and wanting this thing to end, wanting God to bring it to an end. And I'm just afraid that if we continue on the path that we're on for very much longer, they're going to get their wish. They're going to get their wish. And in the meantime, that's going to leave out a great deal of prosperity and hope and good living for a whole lot of people, because whenever God says enough is enough, and he brings down great wrath upon this nation because of the way that we're destroying this nation, whenever that occurs, there'll be no more hope for another generation. There'll be no more hope for a better tomorrow. There'll be no more hope for the very children and the grandchildren that you have in your life right now, that you can see how that they're struggling with bills and struggling with this and struggling with the heat and struggling with all the other struggles that obviously the adult society has brought up into their lives, and to think that they're still in denial. Because like I said, I guarantee you I could drive less than a quarter of a mile from where I'm at right here and knock on somebody's door and say, do you believe in global warming? And they'd say, no way. That is how pathetic that some of the people's thinking is, not only with the environmental problems, but also with the gun problems. So it's reached a level of idiocy. I mean, plain idiocy towards a group of people. And of course, the Bible says that pride cometh before a fall. I mean, these people are so prideful, they're not going to admit that they was wrong about certain issues, including my own, pertaining to the windmill ministries. They rather blame it on the founder of the windmill ministries by saying, well, you said that the first seal had been opened. You said that the Bible said that the Bible promises for there to be peace upon to the earth. It does. I did. But that entails a group of people that gets in behind that individual. If I can't just wave a wand over the earth and say, peace be still. I can't wave a wand over the earth and say, environmental problems go away. Such foolish, hideous thinking is the very thing that has put us where we are right now in the year 2022. And you wonder how come all these diseases continue to keep festering? Well, whenever you take things out of order, like I said, with the ecosystem towards having 2 frogs or 3-headed calves, you can expect more of that. As well as the degenerates that Hillary Clinton talked about, and more people that's going to be born with more problems after problem after problem. This is what that society has brought us into. The adult baby boomer, Woodstock, free love, free sex culture has brought us into where we are right now. And you know, I respect a great deal the elderly people, the old people around me. You know, I'm 61. There's a lot of people that's living that's in their 70s, 75. Some of them, you know, touching off in their 80s. I have a great deal of respect for a lot of them. But there's also a lot of them that, as far as I'm concerned, they're dumber than a rock outside. And what makes them dumb, it's not that they're actually dumb, because a great deal of them are very, very smart, and they're educated, and they can read and write, and they have had farms, and they have performed businesses. They're not dumb. But they're dumb in the areas that we're talking about. They have been ignorantly taught and ignorantly believed in this lie. And I guess, according to their way of thinking, we would go on and on and on until this thing finally just imploded up into itself, kind of like a volcano exploding. And then, of course, it would sure enough be too late for all of us. It's sad, really. It's really sad in how that what went on 30 plus years ago in the White House, whenever 9 tapes went to the Ronald Reagan administration, it's really, really sad what these people, a great deal of these people over here in America, participated in. And I guarantee you one day, pertaining to the Neal family, pertaining to all the other people over in Obion County and Kenton, Tennessee, and these people over here in Weakley County, Tennessee, and the surrounding counties, as much material as I put out to all these different churches, I promise you, they will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Not man's law, but God's law, which is even more prevalent than man's law. The very thing that they claim that they've been teaching and believing in is the very thing that they've been denying. So, you know, once you reach this level of ignorance, you have to start saying, you know what? This may be it. We may have come to the end of our dynasty here in America.
Yeah, and as the Secretary General of the United Nations said, as long as we feed our addiction to fossil fuels, we're going to continue to place political leaders into these untenable positions where all the choices are bad.
And that's the very thing that the people in Mexico said about 10 years ago, or maybe a little longer, whenever we started recognizing the drug problem over here and where the drugs was originating from, towards coming from Mexico. Their response was, well, if the American people didn't have such of an appetite for meth and fentanyl and all these other crazy freaking illegal drugs that's over here, you wouldn't have the problem now, would you? Because it's all based upon supply and demand. And whenever you have such of a high demand, don't think for a second that Mexico can't put out the supply. Because that's exactly what they've been doing. Why have they been doing that? Was because of the demand. So their words was accurate. I think it was somewhere around 2007, maybe 2008, whenever they made that statement, that if it wasn't for the American people with the appetite for the drugs, they would not have the drug problem. But yet, no, it's easier for America to point its finger and say, oh, it's Mexico's fault. Oh, it's Mexico's fault. Is it? Is it really? Just because the devil waves the carrot in front of the bunny rabbit, does that mean that the bunny rabbit has to take a bite out of it? The devil's done his job. It's obvious that we have not done ours by resisting the devil. The Bible says to resist the devil and he will flee from you. And I to this day am still struggling with some issues, personal issues in my life, that I got to go back to the altar from time to time and ask God, please, Lord, please forgive me for being weak in this area. Help me, God, to be strong. Give me the ability to overcome, because I know that what I'm seeing and what my body longs for is wrong. It's incorrect. It's a violation of the things that have been taught in the Bible. But because of the chemicals and because of the availability and because of so many people that has now tried to take wrong and turn it into right and right and turn it into wrong, it's been difficult. It's been difficult for people such as myself to overcome, fully overcome, just as the Bible says, he who shall overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. I got to thinking of that last night. What if my problems that I'm not addressing accurately and professionally, what if those problems is going to cost me my very existence towards the second death? Wouldn't that be sad? Wouldn't that be sad to think that you have went through all these struggles and all these problems in life, and you have done it as sincerely as you can think of, but yet now you have made failures, you have made mistakes, you got overwhelmed by the temptation or temptations. And how many ministers that have we seen today that has done that? Look at the pedophiles in the Catholic Church. Look at the pedophiles in the Southern Baptist Church, and I'm sure there's probably pedophiles and all the rest of them pertaining to grown adults that's had sexual intercourse with children. Sexual intercourse with children. At least I can say that I haven't buckled or bowed that low to the degree of doing anything like that. But you know, whenever the whole shooting combats is corrupt and spoiled, that's exactly what throwed God over the edge towards declaring Sodom and Gomorrah, or declaring the culture of people that was living in the time of Noah, towards they have went too far, to the point of no return. That now God looked at it as it being a worthless situation, to the point that they have all become infested and there's no hope for none of them. Whenever that occurs, my friend, that will be the saddest day of the history of planet Earth, because don't think for a second that God won't move in and bring judgment upon the people's lives pertaining to this type of idiocy, gross idiocy that we're now facing off on in various levels in one thing or one way or the other. And to think that my people around here are still condemning me, they're still throwing rocks at me, to think that the judicial system in this area hasn't still owned up to their own personal mistakes pertaining to my brother's death, and how that they forced a felony down my throat whenever we was concerned about 3 little children across the road, to think that our political system is this damn broken to the point that they're still not wanting to do the right thing, but they're leading us down this path of going off into the mouth of the volcano, speaks volumes about the very people that's in power presently in America. It speaks volumes. They should take all of their personal possessions and they should go home and sob and sob and sob like a child because of the failures that they have brought upon to the very people that put them in power to begin with. But do you think any of them's going to do it? It'd take a movement of God or a movement from the people to do that. That's the only way it's going to happen towards getting them out, because it's very obvious they have led us down a wrong, bad road.
We can't confuse the short term with the long term, Chuck. Getting through this crisis with Russia's invasion is one thing. Getting past the election with gasoline prices, you know, they're already coming down. That's one thing. But investing in more fossil fuel infrastructure that will guarantee emissions increasing for decades into the future, that's a horrible mistake that at this point, we simply cannot afford to make that mistake.
Well, not only that, but we got an idiot over there pertaining to poisonous Putin that within hours after they had made an agreement of how that various countries was in peril of needing wheat from the Ukrainians, and they'd done already worked out some sort of prenuptial agreement towards going and getting this wheat, what does Putin do? He blows up the embargo. He blows up the place where they had all the wheat to begin with over there in Ukraine. Is this guy deliberately trying to destroy the whole world's life, or is this guy only concerned about destroying the lives of the Ukrainians? Because as far as I'm concerned, what he just done within 24 hours ago in blowing up the resources coming from Ukraine in regards towards the agreement of getting that wheat out of there for the American people, we're going to see massive starvation this fall and this winter like we have never ever seen before, and we're going to see prices that's going to go astronomically high to the point that the majority of the working class and the poor class ain't even going to be able to afford to buy a T-bone steak no more. Meat will become right now they're selling cows left and right in Texas because there is no hay to feed the cows, and they know if they maintain that same volume of cows this fall, they've already went down this road of despair, that their cows are going to go hungry unless it costs them thousands and thousands of dollars more to bring in hay from 3 or 4 other different states. And the people still can't see this coming up onto them. The people can't see how that the environment has changed pertaining to how it's breaking all-time records. I think the state of Oklahoma about 4 days ago, for the first time ever, registered triple digits in every one of their counties. I don't know how many counties that they have in Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around some of the other moderate counties, pertaining to 70, 80, maybe 90 counties, but to have every county reaching triple digits for the first time speaks volumes about the intensity of the heat that they have recently went through, not counting what they're going to go through. But we're still dealing with this idiotic approach. It's hideous. It's absolutely hideous. And what a lot of people are trying to help society, that society is throwing back at the very people that's trying to help them. Kind of like me telling, sending the 43rd president, Bush, young Bush, a t-shirt, a bloody road ahead, that I was actually punished for doing that. Spent over 72 hours in a mental institution in Davidson County up in Nashville. And the whole time I was trying to help them. Just like over here in Kentucky. Telling them of electrical disturbances as far as brownouts, blackouts, and every other kind of out. Electrical disturbances with storms and tornadoes and ice storms and torrential, horrendous phenomenon weather patterns. And to think that they thought that I was going to blow up the Kentucky Dam because I was trying to help them by telling them that God had showed me that there was going to be a major electrical disturbances. It's reached a point of hideousness. And you know who's going to pay for the hideousness? It's not going to be those necessarily that has driven us or led us down this road of doom and gloom, but it's going to be all of us. It's going to be each and every one of us that are going to pay the consequences on account of their mistakes.
I want to shift. You talked about the broken democracy, and your concession speech from 2000 was invoked at the hearing. I want to play a clip of that and what Mr. Pottinger, who testified, said about it.
Let there be no doubt, while I strongly disagree with the court's decision, I accept it. And tonight, for the sake of our unity as a people and the strength of our democracy, I offer my concession.
His speech is actually a pretty good model, I think, for any candidate for any office, up to and including the president, and from any party.
Vice President Pence has been called a hero by some for what he did on January 6th. What say you?
Well, in the current environment, just doing what the law and the Constitution requires seems heroic to some. I'm glad he made that decision. You know, he was a freshman congressman sitting in the chamber when I counted the electoral votes in early January of 2001. I think that those who have tried to continue promoting doubt and suspicion about the efficacy of our democracy are really performing in an anti-American way, and they should be held to account. And that committee, by the way, I want to congratulate Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney and every single member of that committee. They are performing an historic service to our nation.
I'm not going to let you go without asking you this. Australia election was a climate change election. And you talked about, in order to get that political will, Jay Inslee tried to run a climate-focused campaign, and it didn't get off the ground. Why not you, Al Gore?
Why not me?
Leading a climate change
candidate?
presidential campaign in the future.
Oh, well, thank you for making the suggestion. But, you know, I'm a recovering politician, and the longer I go without a relapse, the less likely one becomes.
But the idea of climate change and making it the issue, would you like to see more presidential candidates do it?
Absolutely. Public sentiment is changing very dramatically, but we need more grassroots action on the part of Americans, not only in the upcoming congressional races and the presidential race in 2024, but in the local races and in the state elections as well. We, the people, have to solve this, and we have to instruct those who are in positions of leadership to start doing the right thing. Our survival as a species may depend upon it.
Al Gore, thanks for coming on. sharing your perspective and your leadership on this issue. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chuck.
When we come back, the January 6 hearings, will they lead to a criminal prosecution of former President Donald Trump? I'll talk to the Congresswoman who led Thursday's hearing, Elaine Luria of Virginia. Stay with us.
We used to tell everyone that we just switched.
That's probably going to wind up being another joke, like it is towards taking a mass murder. And all of a sudden, some attorney, hotshot attorney, and some doctor jumps up and says, well, we can't prosecute him or her because of them doing this. They've had mental problems in the past, and we can't execute capital punishment on them. Our laws has turned into a very complex, backfiring scenario. And I promise you, if the people was living today, that was living in the late 1800s, early 1900s, was living today towards seeing how the things was disproportionalized the way that they are today, those very same people that would hang an individual if they stole their transportation pertaining to stealing a horse, they would hang them by the highest tree. They would literally laugh our system of courts completely out of office. And that's exactly what they need. They need to be mocked. And the very doctors or attorneys that stand up for these gruesome, murderous, heinous acts should be punished along with the people that they're trying to promote in their innocence. That whatever type of punishment comes to that person should be deviated over to their doctors and to their public attorneys that's trying to represent them in that form. That's how badly that things has gotten out of proportion here in the United States. Once more, they wanted to attack people like me that was trying to help them. They wanted to attack people like Al Gore in not allowing for him to be the Democrat president, towards giving us a 4-star state instead of a 3-star state. And now, years later, we see the development of the consequences thereof. I rest my case. I rest my case on the very powers at bay that I've been dealing with since the late 1980s in trying to get my message out professionally and promptly to not just the church sector, but also to the world, pertaining to where we are and where we was heading. I rest my case. Just like Al Gore said, you know, thank you, but no thank you. I don't need another embarrassing moment in my life that is basically going to be horrendous towards not just myself, but my family members and my friends. Thank you, but no thank you. That's how badly that his feelings got hurt pertaining to what the Tennesseans did not do by holding up their own man. Have a good day. Thank you for letting me speak, and good luck to each and every one of us. God bless. God bless America. God bless our troops. And shalom.